This will kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. You're going to set up a 3D grid. You're going to build out the base of it. Let's see, come on. And then you're going to start adding the details to it. So in this case, I've drawn the windows and I've copied and pasted it on here. The hardest part is actually drawing the details. This is what they will look like. I've given you 3 different styles of windows, a door, a large marquee window, and also the ground of it. Once you get it drawn, it's a simple matter of copying and pasting it into here. Illustrator will do all the perspective work for you. So let's make up a new document. Here's what your blueprint will look like. So this is what you'll follow, and here's all the pictures that you will pull from as well. Nothing new that you haven't done. So I'm just going to make a new document. We'll keep it tabloid, and I've got it turned landscape. We'll say OK to this. And of course, the first thing I need to do is to drop in my blueprint. This is what we're copying. So I'm just going to drag it into here, and we'll keep it on its own layer by itself. So layer 1, lock down, and we'll do everything else on layer 2. The first thing you'll need to do, let's also drop in, your the parts of your image. Drop that in. So there's that. So the first thing you'll need to do is redraw all of the little areas using Illustrator. They're, in essence, pretty easy. Most of them are made up of either the simple shapes or you can quickly draw it off using the pen tool. All of the colors that were used, you can find them in the swatches palette. So they're light or dark browns, light or dark blues and greens, those types of things. Simple gradients. If you don't have this exact font, find something that's very, very close to it. But all you're doing is just recreating everything that's on here. Any questions about this one? Nothing too difficult. All right, so I've already done one of the windows. So I'm going to copy and paste it over. Oh, got it locked down. There we go. So I'm going to copy this one. We'll pretend like I've redrawn this particular window, so you don't have to watch me do it. Again, you'll do one for every window that matches on here. Notice that the windows on one layer, or on each layer, are different. There's your door, there's your marquee. Here's how to set up your document so that everything is in perspective. We're going to be using 2 different tools to do this, and these are your perspective tools. In your toolbox, located towards the bottom center, are your perspective tools. There's the grid tool and there's the selection tool. Pay close attention that both of these are open and that you're going to be using both of these. The first one we're going to use is the perspective grid tool. You may have accidentally turned this on. If you accidentally click on this one, it'll turn on your perspective grid. And this is where, to turn it off, you can do Shift-Command-I. That turns it on and off. That's what that is. There are some controls to this one. We'll go to View, down to Perspective Grid. This is where you can hide it. You can snap things to the grid. I highly recommend you turn off Snap to Grid. We want that to be unchecked. And you can also tell it what kind of grid that you want. So you can do a 1-point perspective, 2-point, or even a 3-point grid. For all that we're doing today, we're just going to keep it as a 2-point grid. And you can also change up the colors and presets to your grid. So if you want it to be a certain color so you can see everything, if you want it to be at a certain angle, this will give you the opportunity to do this. Sometimes dropping the opacity helps out as well. But all of that is found under the View menu at the top. So let me go back under here and turn off Snap to Grid. This way when I create things, it won't be jumping around on me. When you set up your grid, actually, when you set up any type of perspective, what's the most important thing? If you do a perspective drawing, what do you have to have first? Vanishing point, exactly. Your horizon line. Where do things go off to? So if I'm looking at whatever building I'm working at, how do you find your vanishing point?
Where the 2 lines meet.
Exactly. If you were to draw off all of your lines, where would they meet up at? So if I turn on my perspective grid, and I'm going to use my perspective tool, when I do that, you can see it'll light up a lot of the edges. And there's some different little points to consider Notice they're all at the edges. You can click on these and move things around. So this one at the very bottom will adjust the height of it. I'll back up. You can see the height starting and stopping point. Let me turn off this so we can actually see the whole thing. These along the horizon line, the vanishing point, you can adjust the angle that way. If you click at the very bottom, you can move the entire thing around. So if I needed to place it in a specific spot, these at the very bottom will allow me to do this. To change your vanishing point is this one along this way. Where is it? Let's back it up. Oh, okay. Change your vanishing point, use this one. This will allow us to go higher or lower. So if I turn on my picture, what I need to do is I need to align my grid with my photograph. What I look for when I do this is to align this bottom point edge to this point right here. Also notice that there's some little detail work along the edges. So I'm going to click on this very bottom point. I can drag it down, but to move it, I need to work on this bottom edge. So I'm going to move it into place right there. On top of it, same point. Then all I've got to do is adjust my top point to match the top of my building. So drag this up to right there. The second thing is to match my horizon line. So with this point, I'm going to drag it up, and this is where it's going to take a little bit of finagling. If I just move it right here, you can see that this line matches up, but this bottom edge does not. So I'm going to need to be moving back and forth to get it right. So I can drag it over, drag it up until both of the edges will match up. Let me zoom out so we can actually see it. Oh, come on. There we go. My perspective lines are getting off. There we go. Up and over. That's getting it pretty close. I'm looking at this bottom edge and this top edge at the same time. That's got it pretty close. If I've got one side done, it's simply a matter of getting the other one lined up as well, since the vanishing point should be the same for both edges. Now I can zoom in, and we can see what we're looking with. All good? Lines up, pretty close down there. If it's off by just a little bit, I'm okay with that. You're not going to get it 100% all the time. For what we're doing today, this will work out. Notice that that's off by a little bit. Maybe I need to zoom out. We'll readjust it again. Pull it down and in, down and in. Okay. Now let's have fun. Let's actually draw on what I'm working with. If you have the perspective grid selected, and I know it's selected because I can see the individual points lit up, and I've got my tool selected. At the very top left-hand corner, you'll see this little icon. This icon tells you what side or what perspective vanishing point you're working with. So as I'm drawing, I need to be aware of where things need to be. Right now, this one's selected, so the left side is selected. On the right, if I want to place something on that vanishing point, there's that one, or the top and bottom, I can select this one. So I'm going to select, we'll do the right side first. With it selected, I can choose one of my drawing tools. In this case, I'll use the square tool. Check out my cursor. My cursor is no longer just the regular crosshair that I would normally have to draw a rectangle. I've got the little arrow down at the bottom right. This tells me that when I draw, I'm going to be drawing in perspective. And the best part about it is it's going to stay in whatever perspective that I've established. So if I want to make this rectangle form, I can click and drag, and you can see that it's no longer just a rectangle, it's actually a rectangle that's moving in perspective. Pretty cool? And we'll just get it to line up to the box where it needs to be. We'll change the color so you can see it.
Did you create the square or the layout already?
It's one of the JPEGs you're going to download.
Okay.
It's a picture that you're going to place in there. And so all I'm doing is getting it to match up that picture that I created. No matter where I draw, since I've got the right side created, I can click and drag and it will make all of the squares in perspective. If I need to make something on this side, make sure you've got left side selected. I'm going to change my color to be a little bit lighter. Let's see. Now when I click and drag, that's in perspective as well. I can do Shift Command I and it'll turn off the thing and we'll be able to see that. Last one. I'm going to select the bottom one, so it'll be that plane. We'll make this top very light since the light's hitting it from the very top. And I can click and drag and easily draw off the rest of the grid from here. Any questions about this? Super simple. All you've got to do is set it up, and as long as you have your perspective grid turned on, it will be okay. If you turn it off, however, and you start drawing, it's just going to go back into regular flat drawing mode. You're not going to get this nice perspective that you're working with. Here's the next tool to be aware of. We'll turn our grid back on. The selection tool, perspective selection, will allow you to edit something in perspective. So if I was to redraw this as the wrong size, I can select this tool, or select this object, and why doesn't it have my... Oh yeah, I can move it around and it will still move in perspective. So it gets smaller as it goes out. Let's see, let's move it back into place. Or I can resize it in perspective. So now I can make it smaller or larger, and it will continue being in that size as well. So this is very, very easy, very great way of making sure things line up right where they need to be. Maybe I need to make that one a little bit smaller. There we go. And making sure it's all okay. All good? So if I turn off my perspective grid, it should look like that. Here's the next thing to remember. This tool is very different from this tool, your regular selection tool. If you ever click on something with your regular selection tool, it's going to take it out of perspective, and so now when I move it around, you can see it's not changing up the perspective the way I want it to. Even if I have my grid turned on, it's not going to keep it in line. So you always want to make sure your perspective grid tool is selection tool is selected when working with this one to move it in perspective. Questions about this? All good? Here's the last thing that you need to know. So once you've got your building set up and you've got all the little parts created, we're going to add these parts, we'll unlock that, add these parts to your building. And we need to make sure they're in the correct place. What I do is I need to be able to see my building, so I'm going to make one more layer, and we're going to place, make sure it's on top, oops, place layer 3 on top of layer 2, there we go. Place our building parts on layer 3, and we're going to turn off layer 2 for now. So I've got my window, I've got my perspective selection tool selected, and you can see where these windows are going to go. They're going to go along this edge and along this edge. So let's select that edge. Oh, I've already got selected from there. I can select my, yeah, if you already have it selected and you click, you can see automatically it goes into perspective where I want. And as I move it, it gets larger or smaller according to it. So to place it in here, all I've got to do is place it and then scale it down. Remember, hold down Shift so that it scales proportionally. And I've got one window automatically placed in there. If I hold down my Option key, of course you can quickly make the copies, and all I'm doing is copying it from one place to the other. Paste, 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 paste. I can select this one, move it out, make another copy. Let's see, if I choose this one, we're working on this perspective now. Let's see. Nope, automatically, will it not change? Yeah, obviously it won't change. So I need to make a copy of this. Command C. We will choose this side. Command V, paste it. Ha, still not pasting on that one.
Click the left side and then copy the...
Let's try that, yeah. Left side, paste it, still pasting into that one. Perspective. Working without a net here, folks. Ha ha ha. What happens if I release it from perspective? It's obviously not going to move it. Okay, I have made a mistake. No worries. What we're going to do is I'm going to go back, make another copy of the one that I already selected, copy it. This time when I paste it, I'm going to paste it into place. Oops. Make sure it's selected first. Now when I choose my selection, now it's moving correctly. So, just fair warning, paste it first, then select it. So you always want to have a flat copy on hand as you work. Move it in perspective. And now I can continue working along here. So technically, it's not a true 3D structure. It's not like some of the 3D software you can work with. It is a 3D illustration that we're pulling from once we've made it. I've got one row already created. Cancel. I can turn on my building, and I've pasted all of those in the wrong layer. Ha! Let's select them, cut them. Make sure they're in layer 3. Now they're looking good. To where they should be. Got that one created. Top row. Next one would be just to create the windows and the little decorations on all the other rows as well. All good? Real simple, real easy thing to do. What you're going to do, like I said, for your homework is to go and find reference photos for your building. I went out earlier today and I took pictures of the library. So if the library is the one that you're creating, obviously this is what I want to create. I want to redraw all of the windows in perspective and make sure they're correct. I don't want to see any of the bushes or any trees in front of here. I just want to see the building. If it's something small detail like this, you can draw it in perspective, or you could just draw this whole facade flat and then put it into perspective. But I do want to see the stairs if they have it, and I want to see another side of it, so all of these windows. And obviously there's some nice little brickwork patterns that I'm working with. But if I was to, yeah, here's the rest of my reference photos. I took pictures of the windows, so I know what they look like. I know what the brick looks like. I know what the edges of my building looks like. Here's another information, what the library front would look like, library doors would look like. This is what you're working from for your homework once you finish. Notice I've even got this little brickwork pattern. Not every brick needs to be on there, but if it is something substantial, if you got a picture of Mr. Cook, it can be on there as well. This is the side door, and this is the other side windows that are there as well. So for the next part of your project, I would make a new document. I would load up the picture of the building that I'm working on. So I thought this was a nice 2-point perspective into Illustrator. It's obviously a large picture that I took. So we're going to scale it down. And then set up your perspective for this particular picture. Let's make another one. Turn on our perspective grid. Maybe I'd want to drop the opacity of this picture. There we go. So I can see both the grid and that. And then using your perspective grid tool, we would line it up along with my picture. So there at the bottom edge. Some of these you're going to run into are actually in 3-point perspective. Notice how the bottom edge is pretty close to the middle point, but the top gets off by just a little bit. That's because the building is bending upward. It's going into that third perspective. You can turn that on. So my perspective grid could be a 3-point grid. It'll be a little bit more challenging to set everything up, but you could give it that time. I'm going to keep it a 2-point perspective grid just to make it simple for myself. 2-point normal view. There we go. Set it up, turn it on, change up your horizon line. Obviously my horizon line is not going to be very far up since I'm taking at human height. But it's going to be way out here. And we'll get this side as well. Yep, that'll be down there. You can change the width of your grid. The blue and the orange grid itself doesn't really matter because everything will be in perspective, but you can, where is it? Can change up how much of the grid is being shown. But I'm getting into here. Once I've got it, got everything created, I can start drawing off my building. Make sure you got the right side selected. And I can recreate the building from that. Any questions about that? Obviously, I went really quick on setting this up. For yours, take pictures, take a whole building picture and all the little reference photos. This is what you're going to build out from that. Okay, that was it for today.